right, cool. So, hi, I'm Maria Lisa. I'm a user experience researcher, and I like to consider myself a creative technologist. Today, I have the honor and privilege of speaking with award-winning voice actor Tim Friedlander, famous for his performances and the English dubs, like for famous animes, was some of my favorites, One Punch Man and Hunter x Hunter. Great stories if you watched them. If you haven't, please do check them out. They are fantastic stories. Tim is not only known for his majestic voice, but also as the co-founder and president of NAVA, the National Association of Voice Actors. So yeah, hi Tim. It's great to have you here today.
Awesome. Great to be here. And I have two new games. I have a game two new games that came out that came out
Oh
last week.
yes.
So I'm in the Like a Dragon series now, the old Yakuza series from Sega. It used to be called Yakuza,
Oh
now it's Like a
wow.
Dragon. So I took over that last week. So I actually get to announce it. It's the first time I've gotten to announce that I'm in the game.
Oh
So
yay, what an honor to hear
so
that.
it's cool. It's
I'm sure
cool.
there will be some Sega fans. They're gonna be happy to see
Yep.
that brought back.
Yep,
Yes.
yep, yeah. I play Daigo Dojima, who's one of the legacy characters from the previous games. So I took over the role.
Yeah, it's gonna be
So
a nice fun treat
that's
to
pretty
hear you
fun.
get chime
Yeah.
in there. Yeah.
Yep.
So yeah, I kind of want to give a background too and like how
Yeah.
we came to be meeting here today. So yeah, as a UX researcher, I work in technology and it's my job to make sure we're creating technology in a way that keeps humans at its center. Sometimes in tech we focus a lot on building something and the fact that we can and a lot less on whether we should and what the impact might be once we do. And a big part of my day to day is actually having interviews, talking to folks, hearing what they need from technology and how it might impact them. And also sitting down with subject matter experts like yourself. So
Cool.
I kind of wanted to flex that skill in a different setting.
Yeah.
I actually got to see Tim speak at New York Comic Con this
Mm,
past year. He was doing a panel on voice acting and AI, and I thought it was incredibly powerful. I was like, more people need
cool.
to hear about this, more people need to know. So he graciously agreed to sit
Yeah.
down with me and do this. So
Let's do it.
yeah, that's how we got here today.
Awesome.
Um, yeah, so I'm really excited to dig into like some heavy topics today. But before we get into all that, all the generative AI and its impact on creative industries like voice acting, I did want to kind of like take it back to the beginning, since voice acting isn't always like a like immediately obvious field to someone who's
Mm,
getting started in their path creatively. It's a kind of
yeah.
invisible craft. I'm
Yeah.
curious how you found yourself there and like if you could describe your journey into it.
Yeah, it's a good question. I grew up in theater. I grew up on the stage. I grew up in music and performing and all that stuff. And I've kind of had this voice since I was like 18, 17, 18. Um, and back in the 90s, it was you could basically be like, hey, you have a great voice, you should do radio, or you should do basically you have a great voice, you should do radio was kind of the whole thing, right?
Mm,
So I had a radio show in college for a year, which I just hated. I am not a fan of being on the radio. I like to listen to it, but I don't want to be a DJ. I didn't want to be on the radio. Um, so I started training in the 90s when I was in Seattle. I'm from the Seattle area, and the late 90s I started studying and training and exploring what voiceover was, which at the time was just commercial. It was TV and radio, right? I mean, the internet really didn't exist in any way that it existed. Streaming didn't exist, obviously, in the way that we have it now. YouTube was nothing, right? So we're talking about, I was when I was first starting in, like, Real Networks was just launching, right? And I was in Seattle, so I was around all of Microsoft, and Amazon hadn't gotten to Seattle yet, really. Tech was just kind of, really we were just on the bubble of the first tech boom burst, right? That of everybody in Seattle making millions of dollars and then everything just disappearing.
mm,
And so I worked for about 4 years to train, and in 2002 came down to LA with a demo, and just failed at it for years. I just really struggled and failed and quit. I went back to grad school in 2014, and when I was in grad school, I was just like, I'm done with voiceover. And I was working on my thesis and figured I'd go to a convention, and I went to a convention. In 2014, went to a voiceover convention because I had tickets and I didn't want to lose the money, didn't want to waste the money that I'd already spent, and met a bunch of people who were doing the same thing I was doing, which was struggling, right? Learning, not really knowing
mm,
what it was to be in the industry. Because voiceover, we all work from home and we have for years, but it's a very isolating craft where you could potentially never actually talk to anybody else for months on end in your business. You never really have to interact with anybody else. You work from home. Um, and so I met a bunch of people who were doing the same thing I was doing. And it was myself. It was a bunch of people who have just blown up in the industries. Myself, Jason Lanier White, who is a big video game dubbing guy, Lila Berzins, who's a big video game actor, and guy Kyle Chappell, who is just everywhere. Joe Zija, I met around that same time, who's a big video game actor. And we all kind of started, we all kind of progressed through this career over the last 10 years around, around the same time. Um, Went full time in 2016. 'Cause I decided I would give it one more try. I'm like, let me just give this one more try, and went full time in 2016 and built the studio that I'm in now. I've had the studio for a while and opened it up to the voiceover community, and slowly grew that into what became our Facebook groups, and then in-person workouts, and eventually became Nava. And that's where
Wow.
we are today. So
Yeah, it's quite
a
the
bit of a
journey.
journey.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
quite the
Yeah.
journey. I can definitely relate.
Yeah.
Like my path into technology was very meandering, and like there was
Yeah.
lots of
Yeah.
times where I felt like I was failing. But yeah, sometimes you stick things out and you
Yeah.
find another way to relate to it. It sounds like a big part of it too was finding your community. Like you
Yeah.
met people
Absolutely.
that were going through it, and you also built a space for people to participate in and share the
Yeah.
craft. So I'm
Yeah.
glad you
Yeah.
stuck it out, and it's also
Yeah.
like it's
Yeah.
inspiring because there's a lot of moments where sometimes taking a break is a good call for someone. It is like.
Absolutely. No, absolutely. And that's one of those things, to be able to step away and come back to it. And I decided I was done, and when I decided I was done was when everything picked up and everything kind of fell into place. You kind of quit that. There's something about the power. I said the power of giving up, but the power of surrender, or whatever it is, to quit.
Mm.
You're kind of battling that same. You're just banging your head against the wall over and over and over again, and finally you just stop and you step away and you get to see something different. Um, and that was, at least at that point in 2014, that was a big, just lots of things happening in my life that changed, and I just, I changed everything. I decided just to revamp my entire life and get rid of all my old friends and quit my jobs and try and find something new. So it was it was definitely, at that point, was a big transformative moment in life in general, which just happened to kind of coincide with the rise of the voiceover career at the time. So
Yeah, and it sounds like then when you found your way back to it, it was like, I guess that transformative time, it did what it needs to do. And some things
yeah,
you're meant for, just maybe not the time you thought that
yeah, yeah,
you were.
exactly.
So
Yeah,
that's
yep, 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 yep.
um
Yeah.
and you kind of alluded to this a bit
Mhm.
throughout, talking about your journey, but it sounds like the landscape of AI, I mean of AI, I think of voice acting has changed a lot.
Oh, dramatically. Yes.
Yeah, so I'd love for you to like kind of walk us through that too. Like how have
Yeah.
you seen it change? It sounds like, you mentioned it, like there was a time where it was kind of like radio and TV, and now
Yeah.
there's like internet and there's YouTube and there's gaming and there's all the
Abs
stuff that's
yeah.
picked up.
Absolutely. I think that, a couple, they're the biggest change in this was the rise of the internet, was the ability, and that impacted a lot of, kind of coincided with a few other things that was happening in early 2000 or so. There was a SAG-AFTRA strike, which, at the time that it happened, if you wanted to do voiceover, you had to be in the union, or you couldn't find any jobs, right? You had to be a SAG-AFTRA, or at this time there was SAG or AFTRA. Um and the work was union. The real work that you wanted to get was all union, and you needed an agent, and you needed to be in a place where those jobs were. Those jobs were in Los Angeles and New York and Chicago. They
Mm,
weren't in Seattle, or if they were in Seattle, they were in very limited supply. And it was TV and radio. I mean, that was primarily where things were. You wanted to get a commercial, and that's what it was. Games, there wasn't the game industry the way that we think it. This is pre Halo, right? This is pre games that had any kind of really big narrative to them. There were some smaller ones out there, but not to the point where you'd be like, oh, I want to make a career in video games. But the strike of 2000, coinciding with kind of the rise of the internet, really, I don't know if I want to say democratized the industry, but it really made it accessible for a lot of people who didn't live in New York and LA, because the industry blew wide open, and you could have the online casting sites where you could live in Tennessee somewhere, you could live in Minnesota, and you could go online and get access to auditions and access to jobs and book work that would be legitimate work. um and that kind of coincided with the strike, because what came out of the strike of 2000 was this rise of non-union, this idea that there could be non-union work, that there could be jobs that maybe didn't have to be done through an agent, or through a union, or through a casting director. You could go directly from talent to client, and that
mm.
that was a real big change. So we've seen that rise over the last 20 years. I think 2004 was when Voice 123 went online, so we're coming on 20 years of that. Um, and that, those types of sites just completely changed the face of the industry, and the accessibility, and the I'm hesitant to say gatekeeping, but there lots of things were very much under lock and key. Like, they were you had to be in LA and New York if you wanted the big work. And to a certain extent you still do. You need to be in the hubs of where the production is happening. It and that a lot of times that's where the work is. But it doesn't mean that but now there is a massive amount more of there's streaming, there's YouTube, there are all these training videos, right? Industrial, co-ed, corporate educational industrial videos that every time a training company has to redo a training video, they need a new voice for it, or other things along those lines, right? And now we're in that next transformative area, which is the rise of synthetic voices, generative AI that is, we went from the work being taken out of the union hands and out of the agent's hands into the voice actor, and now the work is being taken from the voice actor directly into technology, and the
Hmm.
tech can now do the work. So there's been this is kind of why I think I'm hesitant to say democratization, because I think it's I don't consider AI to be democratization. I think it's the opposite of democracy, because I think it reduces opportunities for people to have access to something, and I don't think that's democratization. I think
Yeah.
it makes the computer the artist while eliminating the human ability to be an artist. And I don't think that I don't view that as being very democratic. Um,
Yeah, there's a lot of like layers to this, right? Because you've
yeah,
spoken
yeah, yeah,
towards how the industry changed and how it
mhm,
became this kind of democratization in
yeah,
large part in response to technology, right? There being
yeah,
access, there being
exactly.
a way to like remove
Yep.
those gates. And now we're like the pendulum is swinging the other way,
Yeah,
and now it's going to a point where
yeah.
I guess like video killed the radio star kind of thing is
Right. Yeah.
happening,
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
where we're
Yep.
starting to
Yep.
see, AI, and I think when we think about generative AI and wanting it to be a tool, we want it to be a tool. We don't want it to replace the painter. You know what I mean? It should be
Right.
another tool in the tool belt, but effectively, without more guardrails or without more like just us having the conversations that need to be had around
Right.
this as a subject matter where it can potentially do that effectively. And that is sort of what sounds like it might be happening today. And that kind of leads
Yeah.
me to my next question, which
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
you kind
Yeah.
of already, anticipating it, but
Yep.
bringing generative AI into the fold, right? There are
Yeah.
tools out there that generate human-like voices or they can
Mhm.
clone your voice.
Yep.
Today there's some tools out there that sport or advertise like, hey, they only need like a 3-minute
Need
sample of
three
audio in
seconds.
order
3 seconds.
3 seconds. That's,
Hmm.
it's pretty
Yep.
impressive, but also a little
Yeah.
scary, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm curious as a voice actor, like what are some of the positives and negatives you're seeing of like the rise of this kind of technology?
Yeah, the biggest negative we're seeing across the board, and this is for artists of any kind, is the elimination of jobs, of the ability to the loss of the ability to make a living at the career that you want to be in. And many artists, I mean, many artists work for years and years and years for no pay. You work to build your craft, to put in all of that sweat equity, to put in all of that time building your business, to eventually get to the point where you can get paid for the work that you do. And now when we get to that point, now AI, synthetic voices, are coming in and saying, well, we can just do it for cheaper, faster, and sometimes better, not always better. Um, and so now you're looking at loss of jobs. I think the most recent, there's a report that came out on Monday that said, the next 3 years, California alone is looking at losing 62,000 jobs in the entertainment industry to AI. You're looking, on nationally at 250 to 300,000 jobs lost over the next 3 years. Those are people, those are jobs. Those aren't people who are gonna be like, hey, you're gonna lose your job and here's another one. These are people who lose their job and lose the ability to make a living and pay their rent and pay for food and to pay for health care and to pay for their kids to be able to go do sports and to be able to become artists and to do the things they want to do. Um, the technology is here. So how do we work with it? We talk a lot about it can be used to supplement and make somebody's and enhance somebody's career as opposed to replace them in that career. And there are
Mm-hmm.
places where you can license, we're looking right now at this big copyright issue, right? Of how many of these foundational models and these systems are built on either public domain material that or copywritten material that they're considering to be fair use. And all of those things, they're taking something that they consider to be fair use and turning around and making a commercial product out of it and selling it back to people.
Mm-hmm.
And if they're doing that and making a profit from it and it's going beyond research, then there should be a licensing fee involved. There should be royalties and residuals and some kind of compensation for the use of my intellectual property, or in our case, our voice, our biometric property, um, which voice is not protected, right? We don't have currently federally, you don't really have a right to the sound of your voice, We're hoping to get that in place, but it currently doesn't exist. So how can we find a way to enhance it as opposed to replace artists? And is there a way that we can license it? Great. You want to use my voice? Great. Here is my voice fully licensed to you for this amount of time, for this amount of money to be used for this product and to say these things. Now it's when we lose that consent, that control, and that compensation that basically you're being stolen from and you're being replaced at the expense of your job for the benefit of more than likely just a select few who own the company or who are going to be able to make a ton of money off of the fact that they don't have to pay voice actors or artists of some kind to create their product.
Yeah, I can see this being like this is definitely an area where we need to figure out what the legislation is around it. It's a
Yeah.
new, like it's a
Yeah.
growing pain. We didn't know we would be able to
Right.
have voice likeness, like digital likeness, voice likeness. This is something that's new,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
it's for me, it does seem like it's a kind of your voice is kind of like a fingerprint, like it's something very
It's
unique.
a voice print, a voice print. Yeah,
Voice print,
absolutely.
yeah, like you
Yeah.
said,
Yeah.
biometric data, yeah. So
Yeah.
this seems like stuff that we're
But
gonna need
it's
to figure out because,
it's absolutely we're going to need, but it's not like your voice is not protected.
hmm
In you have some rights to it in California and New York and Chicago or in Illinois and Texas has some laws. Washington has some things in place, right of publicity laws, um, but nothing that is very strongly in place is going to protect somebody from just taking your voice and making you say anything that they want you to say.
yeah, that's
Right,
the
and
scary
that's
part. They
that's a
can
scary.
take your
Absolutely.
voice. Yeah,
Yep.
they can have you
Absolutely.
saying something that you would
Yep.
never say, and it's
Exactly. Yeah.
these are lines that,
Yeah.
this is where I would say technology is kind of undermining our humanity to some extent, right?
Yeah.
Our essence or
Yeah.
who we are, how we
Yeah.
occupy space. This is your likeness, your physical likeness can change, and your voice,
Yeah.
you can something can happen in theory, God forbid. But yeah, like there's
Yeah.
still something to that that's like shouldn't be, stolen or especially not without
Yeah.
consent. What were the C's you
Exactly.
said? I like that. You said
Yeah.
control, consent.
We have consent, control, and compensation, the three C's that we've been asking for. Nava's kind of that's been our platform. But yeah, you lose the autonomy. Like, if I,
Mhm.
potentially you're talking about, losing your ability for free speech to have your voice say, it's one thing, I should have the right to say what I want to say, but along the same lines, I also should have the freedom of speech to not be forced to say something that I would never say. And for my
Mhm.
voice, because our voices are recognizable, right? I mean, you call your parents, your grandparents, your brother, sister, whatever. All they do is they say, "Hey," and you're like, "Oh, I know who that person is." They don't. We're not recognizing people based on their performance. We're not saying, "Oh, well, that sounds like the way my mom would say something." You're like, "Oh, I recognize the sound of that person's voice." They could say anything on the phone, and you would recognize them. But
Yeah, that's very true. That's a
yeah,
cool way of putting it too. The what hooked into my mind there was just the kind of freedom of speech that is kind of like an
yeah,
extension of that. It's just
yeah,
like a new domain. It's a new territory
right.
we didn't know we'd enter into, but it is like an extension of that space as well too.
Yeah,
Um
and imagine that you go on there and like if I'm talking about video games or anime or commercials or anything, I walk into a session and I get a script and it says something that I don't agree with. I'm like, I can't say these words. I can physically not read that script. But if my voice has been cloned and is being used in a way that I don't have the ability to control what it says, there's potential for that voice to say something that I would never say. We saw this a year ago, about a year ago this time there was a kind of a big spree of doxing on Twitter where somebody had taken voice actors and cloned their voices and made fake Twitter profiles with the actor saying things they would never say, saying, "Hi, my name is so and so. Here's my home address. Here's my phone number," and then saying racist and homophobic things. And it was over 4 or 5 days. It took about 5 days to get those removed from Twitter. There's one profile that's still up on Twitter, has never been removed. And it's somebody saying, "Hi, my name is so and so, and here is my address." And then you know, F this, whatever, how many, whatever derogatory things you could think of saying, and it says those things. And it's recognizable, if you know this person, it's recognizable as this person. Um, that's a very extreme case in this. The other case, is look at what's happening with with Taylor Swift or with
right.
Kelly Clarkson, where somebody has turned these or Scarlett Johansson, where they've taken behind the scenes footage and their voice and their video and created fake commercials out of that. And that looks like them. So now on, like that's just, it's egregious. It is egregious enough. It's not as bad as, as some of the bad things that have been happening. But somebody is, manipulating and using somebody's name, image, and likeness and voice to sell a product, right? Sell their product using something that they stole from somebody else.
Yeah, basically it is stolen
Mm.
property. It's just a
Right,
new kind of
yeah,
property we have to
yeah.
acknowledge.
Hmm.
That reminds me kind of one of the elephants in the room is that, right, legislation is notoriously
Hmm.
slow around
Yeah,
technology.
yeah, yeah.
Like in particular,
Hmm.
it's like we've been catching up a bit recently, like starting to
Yeah,
acknowledge some of our hiccups, some of our growing pains, things that are going wrong with
yeah,
social media's influence over like, youth and also just like all the things that have happened with Facebook and
yeah, yeah. Exactly.
democracies around the world. So
Yep,
we're starting to catch up,
yep,
but
yep.
that's one thing that I'll say I feel like is a little bit of a silver lining with generative
Hmm.
AI is that
Yeah.
everyone kind of like woke up a bit. It did get everybody to like lift their heads
Oh,
up and realize
absolutely.
this is
Yeah.
a big deal. This isn't your average like, oh, this is a nice
No,
2.0 trendy thing. No, this is
no,
different.
no.
So
Yeah,
I do feel like a little bit more of a push around legislation. There's like or like
yeah,
court cases coming out. I know New York Times is taking ChatGPT to court
yeah,
for, like we said, scraping copyrighted or what they're
yep,
considering fair use stuff. And I think the
yeah,
FTC recently was trying to like crowdsource what could be done around voice acting. So they're
yeah,
kind of
yep, yep.
asking the public.
Yeah, they had asked people along those lines. There's legislation. There's the No AI Frauds Act and then the No Fakes Act, which are both bills, House and Senate bills that are in right now. The No AI Frauds Act actually explicitly makes voice and image a personal property right, which
Yeah,
is something that we want to say. Yeah,
I was looking over that and I was like, this is
yeah,
great. This is a step in the right direction. So
yeah.
I do feel like it's nice to see that even though legislation typically moves really slow, there is sort of a wake up call, a call to action. I think that people are feeling
There's a
more
call to action.
fiercely.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, and we're in an election cycle, right? I mean, we are in,
That's true.
we're 6 7 months away from an election, from a presidential election. I mean, we've already seen, last week, week before this interview, we saw, a synthetic version, a clone version of Joe Biden telling people not to go vote, say don't go vote in this primary. You don't need to vote or something like that, right? A fake version of that. And you get into the real basic fact of the matter is that anything post 2022 could potentially be AI generated. You can't believe
Hmm.
anything that was generated after January 2022 or
Hmm.
2020. Yeah, January, whatever the original. I believe it was January 2022 when they started releasing um, some of the original foundational models that were being created, and things started to come out in 2023. So those data sets were based on things from like January 2022 and later. So you have to look at when was this image created? Look in the internet. When was this image created? If it came out, after January 2022, you have to look at it and say, is this thing actually factual? Is this image real? Is this video real? Is this something that factually happened? Because it's possible that it didn't. And you see this all over social media all the time on Facebook of, hey, can I get a thumbs up for this little kid who drew this amazing piece of art and it looks like a legitimate picture and it's an AI generated image of a kid who drew this amazing piece of artwork, right? And it's not real. And there's hundreds of people who are going, wow, this is amazing. I love this kid. This kid's artwork is so phenomenal. It was stole. They stole that from somebody to create that AI generated image piece of art that they have there.
Yeah, it's a territory that's like I'm definitely interested in what AI can do and again like using it as a
Yeah,
tool. But if we enter
yeah,
this space where we're in like a post-truth era where everything's like a deep fake like
absolutely. Yeah.
hellscape, this is not
Yeah.
great. You know, like we
Well, I mean,
can't
and
trust this.
we are in that, we are there already. I
Mm,
mean, is that you've had Sports Illustrated being caught with AI generated articles. You've had lawyers using AI generated law citations for cases that didn't exist, right? You look at that, and here is a full, a full court case citing law and things that never existed. And
mm.
how are we supposed to know that? If a lawyer
If the
lawyer try to
lawyer
put that,
didn't know,
right, the
yeah.
lawyer doesn't know these things, they try and put it through, or you have images, or you read an article in some magazine about something, and that never happened. It never actually happened. The computer made that up as a hallucination of something that never happened.
Yeah, that's another thing. Like the guardrails aren't kind of quite
Right.
properly in place yet.
No,
Like
no, no,
that's
no.
something that the open AI and different like
Yeah.
creator spaces of that kind of technology are aware of, and they're trying to put those guardrails in place and also show
Well, I
it
mean,
like not
they're
to
putting
hallucinate.
guardrails in place
But
now that they've developed their technology and have a ton of money. Put those guardrails in place, and now it keeps the competition out, because now everybody else that comes after him has to abide by these very strict guardrails that they didn't have to abide by when they first came up.
That's
you know.
another interesting point too.
So
There's
yeah,
that kind of the open debate of like, should this still be open source or should there be just
right.
like the few that developed it and they're the experts in the room? That there's a case for either, but it is sort of like carving the space for some folks to just be the giants leading like light years
Well,
ahead of others.
yeah, I
And
mean, and then that is, if the goal of AI is for the betterment of humanity, then it should be open source, and you really want to democratize it, socialize it, make it open to everybody, and let everybody benefit from it. If the purpose of AI is to for the betterment of humanity, then everybody needs to have equal access to it, and everybody
mm,
needs to have equal rights to use it and benefit from it.
yeah, I definitely agree with the
Mm,
equal access to be able to
mm,
use it and access it.
yeah,
Open source is a little different though. That definitely means like everyone
yeah,
can build something themselves. And then
yeah,
that
yeah, for
for
sure,
me,
yeah,
I feel like that goes back to the whole legislation. Like we're gonna need some stuff in place in terms of
yeah, oh yeah, absolutely,
not
yeah,
even
yeah,
definitely our voice rights to around our voice rights around
yeah,
our likeness, but also like just a digital bill of rights or something that
yeah.
kind of put some guardrails in place, period. Because even just data privacy is not something
Oh,
that
yeah.
is
I mean,
cohesive in our country. Like it's like all
it,
over the place and it can
yeah,
change anytime. So
yeah,
like basically anything we have agreed to, anything we've used, even me like setting up this mic, had to do some terms and
absolutely.
agreement stuff.
Yep.
They
Yep.
can
Yep.
change that, flip that whenever they want. And that's just another
Yep.
area where we kind of need a yeah, what is it? Crawl before we can walk, Like we
Yeah.
just
Right. I
gotta
mean, yeah.
take a beat,
Yeah.
take a beat. There's this like
Yeah.
soar into the sun business and technology, and
Right.
I
Right.
don't
Yeah.
really get what's the rush.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like there's a lot of problems we need to figure out first, and access to stuff is important, but also
Yeah.
like how we're using this stuff at all and how it impacts
Yeah.
folks is
Yeah.
also equally important.
Yeah.
Um, one thing I want to ask is, given that, this legislation is starting to get a
Mhm.
bit more traction, is there kind of language or stuff that you would hope someone who's working on the crafting
Mhm.
policy, you would hope
Yeah.
that makes it in there that you're like, hey, this should be represented as a voice, as a professional in the space that you'd
Yeah.
want that language.
I think the ability to part of it, is figuring out how to make the sound of your voice something that is protected. And that's something that I think everybody is struggling with. Making your voice a property right is great, puts that, in the right direction, but making a federal right of publicity, um,
Mm,
is going to be very important. Those two things together, I think, are going to be, I think, short of creating new laws and new terminology and new ways of identifying something, those are going to be the most immediate ways to put something into place. Right of publicity is in California and New York, mainly for celebrities, that says you can't take something that even sounds like somebody else and represent it as them. Bette Midler and Tom Waits were the ones who created these laws, or their cases became the basis for these laws in, like, late '90s, late '80s, early '90s. Um, Specifically, is Bette Midler and Ford, and Ford hired somebody. They tried to get Bette Midler and she wouldn't do it, so they hired somebody who sounded just like her
mm,
and put out a commercial that basically implied that that was her voice and she was endorsing that product. So using my voice on it in something implies that I have endorsed that product and I am publicizing that. And I have a right to know what my voice is contributing to and publicizing. And even if I'm not Bette Midler level known celebrity, that doesn't mean that somebody's not going to recognize my voice and assume that I agreed to promote that product. And so
mhm.
something federally that goes into place like that is something that we need, and will help considerably.
All right, so like likeness and also like publicity and that like
Yeah.
making sure that things are like you said consensual and
Yeah.
controlled compensation. Yeah, that
Exactly. Yeah.
reminds me
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
more of the work you're doing with Nava. I was wondering if you
Mhm.
could share with us kind of what work's being done there and how you're
Yeah.
helping maybe actors in the space kind of navigate
Mhm.
the new landscape. I noticed some like really cool documentation on your site, sort of
Mhm.
explaining like ways to guide someone through a contract if they're working on a project that
Yeah.
doesn't incorporate AI. I was hoping you
Yeah.
could speak to that.
Yeah. Yeah. We Nava is we launched in November of 2022. We're fairly new. We are a nonprofit association for the advancement of the voiceover industry specifically. And we launched with access to national health care for freelance voice actors is what we launched with. And that was our big push in November of 2022, and then immediately jumped into the AI discussion. And part of what we came out with is we started with an AI rider, which is something that you could, as a voice actor, put into a pre-existing contract or add into an agreement that you have with a client that says very specifically you will not take my voice and use it for machine learning or for AI. That was a very, very basic. So we'd also, not only do we not want to have our voices cloned, we don't want to contribute to the technology that is going to be used to create those cloned voices. We don't want our voice to be in this machine learning. We don't want our voice to be using to train these clones and these synthetic models. So that's where that came into place, and that's grown. We've started with with version 1. We're now on version 3, 3.5 or so. That's kind of been modified and grown over the last year in based on feedback from talent and from producers and directors on what they would want to see in that agreement. We also have, we've done multiple webinars over this last year for voice actors to just educate people on what it means. What do these auditions mean? You get an audition for TTS, like a text to speech audition that's going to pay you $10,000. Well, is that good or bad? Is that enough money, or is that not enough money? What do we need to look at? And Melissa Medina, who is a voice actor but comes from a tech background, put together for us. We call them the 13 questions to ask, and you can go to the website, and any job that you're going to interact with or that you're auditioning for that you think has an AI component to it, you ask these 13 questions so that you have enough information to even know if is $10,000 might be great. It may be that job maybe should pay $100,000 for what they want for this. They want, full rights in perpetuity, and they want to use your voice to be able to train for machine learning for the next 10 years for what, for $2,000? That's not going to be worth it. For $100,000, possibly $200,000, now you're getting close. Maybe $500,000 for the next 5 years. Now you're looking at something that could potentially, because you're going to potentially lose work and be out of a job, could potentially be something that you could take at that point. But if you don't have enough information, you can't really answer that question.
Yeah, so having these questions in place to give those actors some guidelines, how to
Yeah,
learn what their voice is worth, or like
yeah,
into what capacity it should be used or not. It's very
yeah,
interesting. I always
yeah,
find it fascinating that in the entertainment industry there is that
yeah,
language of like in perpetuity.
yeah,
Like I'm just
yeah,
like,
yeah, yeah.
what? Like that seems wild for any part
It's
of a person to be
it's
owned to
yeah.
any
Well,
degree
well, and
forever.
it
Like
it's supposed to
what?
be just exactly right. It's supposed to be just that performance, right? Like,
Mm,
in an audiobook or like in a video game, you have to have in perpetuity in a video game, or else they have to stop selling that video game at some point,
oh,
right?
gotcha.
I'm in a video. I'm in Like a Dragon, and my voice can be used as long as in perpetuity for as long as that game is sold. And somebody buys that game, I don't have a right to go and say you can't play that game because my voice is in it. Right? I've
Mm,
given up rights to that performance, though, to that specific thing that I recorded with those words at that moment, in that time, in that studio that I was in, to be used in that game, in that context. And that in perpetuity is okay. Like, there's no way, you can't, a game company cannot go around and say, great, so this voice in 5 years has to be removed from the game, and in 10 years this voice has to be removed, and in 20 years this voice has to be removed. It's not viable, and we know that, right? I mean, same thing on camera, right? In any movie that's out, you've given away in perpetuity the right to exploit that performance for that
hmm
movie in that context, in that agreed upon purpose. What's happening
Yeah.
is that in perpetuity becomes, oh, well, we own the rights to this audio file to do whatever we want to with it for as long as we have it. And that's not at all what we have agreed to. We've agreed to that performance in that context with those words that I said, not to take the sound of my voice and create a synthetic version of it.
Yeah, I feel like that language needs to be there too. It's like it
Yeah,
needs to be
absolutely.
explicit.
Yep.
Like, don't
Yep.
create synthetic voices with my
Yep.
voice too. Even if
Exactly.
you gave it to that context, in theory, they could. I'm wondering, I'm just wondering if they could potentially say, "This is the game part two," and then get you,
Well,
like something like that. I would
that's
hope
all.
not, but
They no they can't. That's in the if you're under a union contract, that's very explicitly in the contracts that it's
okay, cool.
for that game. If you or if they want to use it as in the next game, they pay you again, and you get paid again, right? So I mean, we're not against the getting paid for something. There's a possibility. Like, if you want to reuse that performance in a new game, absolutely go ahead and do it, but pay me for it, because you're going to make a lot more money off of it. You're going to make more
hmm
money off of that second game. Um, but you can't just use it without my permission. And that's in the existing contracts. That's integration or use in other games, or in subsequent games, or prequels or sequels or whatever you want to call it. That's
Yeah,
there supposedly. So
that makes sense. That's good to know.
yeah,
Okay, yeah, it's just
yeah,
double
yeah,
checking, but it's great to,
yeah, yeah,
hear someone who works in the industry and be able to confirm that language is there, and then it's
yeah,
now adding more detail and more
yeah.
counting in this new use case where AI could be a thing. You don't want your voice to be used for even training it because that's something
Oh,
else too.
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Yep,
Yeah, to be able
agreed.
to hear it. new
Yeah.
emotional resonance that's like
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
my emotional resonance.
Yep.
Um, one thing I'm curious about is, assuming this is a big
Yeah.
assumption, but
Yeah.
if let's say we do it and we create legislation that's protecting people's rights, their digital likeness, their voice likeness, like, and we actually make this in a way that is fair
Mm,
for everyone.
yeah.
What are some cool use cases you think of having a generative AI as a voice actor? Like it's within your rights and stuff that you could see yourself wanting to use it for.
So if we're talking, are we talking generative AI? Are we talking like text to speech? Are we talking like just synthetic
Um,
voices in general? Because there's and there's benefits to all of those, right? You could, um, when we talk about generative AI from a synthetic voice perspective, we're looking at, for example, like in a video game where you have an open world game and you come across somebody in a village, and a generative AI, my voice could be used to interact with the player character in that game.
mm,
And that's and generative AI could be attached to Chat GPT, it could be attached to whatever, and they could have a conversation about anything, right? Um, but so in that case, I don't know what my character is going to say. I don't know what that voice is going to say. There have to be some kind of safeguards in place to keep it from going off the rails, or for somebody from coming and having a conversation that turns dark or turns whatever, racist, homophobic,
mm,
whatever, wherever it could go. So that's the generative side of that. I mean, and I think, from a player consumer perspective, to be able to run into like an NPC, a non-player character in a village or in whatever it might be in a game, and to be able to have a different conversation every time you meet them. It's a different day of the week. Oh, well, what happened over the last couple of days? Oh, well, let me tell you what happened. So and so came along here and we had this, and something that sticks in the context of the game. That I think is pretty impressive. How do you get paid for that as a voice actor? If it's generating more and more and more and more lines, I should be paid a generation fee for the content that my character speaks. Um, that's potentially, potential income in there. Now, if you're talking like text to speech, you could have potentially, we want to, like you're saying, about, subsequent games. Well, great. We want to license your voice for 5 games,
mm,
and you're going to come in and do one recording for 4 hours, and then we're just going to generate a ton of content out of that voice for the next 5 games. And the scripts are going to be predetermined. You'll be able to see what the script is. You'll know what it is. You'll know how many lines are going to be made. For every 300 lines that your character says, you get paid more money, and that's a possibility. Is the performance going to be as good? I don't think so. Is it going to be something that can be as creative? I don't think so. Or we talk about impossible jobs, like these jobs that we as a human can't do. For example, like the one example we use a lot is, the New York Times.
mm,
For accessibility, when they release the printed version of the New York Times every day, if it comes with a companion audio version, read cover to cover of the New York Times, no human can do that. I cannot physically read the New York Times cover to cover every single day to coincide with the release of the publication. It's not going to be printed ahead enough. As a human, there's not enough time to get the final version and to be able to read it and record it and edit it and produce it and put it out and mix and master and make sure that it goes out correctly. That's something that no human can do. Somebody wants to license my voice for that. Now you've licensed my voice and you've created now an accessible version of the New York Times read by a human that is more enjoyable to listen to than a text to speech robot reading the New York Times. Or our vice president Karen Gilfrey, she has a synthetic voice that reads weather reports anywhere in the world at any time. That's something a human can't do, right? No human can be on the phone all the time reading the weather report at every location in the world when on demand.
mm,
So that's an impossible job. That's something that that's somebody that a human could license your voice out for, and it could do that job, which is it's not taking a job away from somebody, because a job that didn't exist in the first place is creating a job. That's
mm,
a possibility. That's something where it could come, where something like that comes into play, as long as you have the consent and control, and you say, great, it's not in perpetuity. You get to use it for a year, and at the end of this year, we're going to re-up the license. Then that's something where it could be beneficial and could be usable.
Yeah, I love all of these examples. Like you really brought me through like an entire, I feel like the entire landscape to some degree,
Yeah,
just like
yeah,
from
yeah,
generative AI to synthetic voices to also
yeah,
text to speech to also
yeah,
impossible jobs. That's really awesome. I'm like
yeah,
mine's still spinning.
yeah,
Because just from I'm still thinking about the free form gameplay, like the idea
yeah,
of having that
yeah,
be
yeah.
organic every time. That's really
Yeah.
cool.
And yeah, I mean,
Um,
imagine, you show up to, I mean, best thing, you're going through like what, Horizon Zero Dawn or whatever, you're going through a game and you go into a village and you see a villager and they're like, "Oh, hey, what's happening? I saw you here 4 days ago. What took you so long? Where you been? What have you been doing?" And you're like, "Oh, well, I went out on this mission and I was like," they're like, "Oh yeah, so and so Aloy came through here 5 days ago or something like that, and something happened and you'd be like, "Hey, what's that box over there?" "Oh, that box over there? Well, I don't know. Let me go take a look. Let's go open that box over there and see what we got." And you're like, "Hey,
yeah.
let me get that, what are you doing today?" "Oh, well, nothing. Just had some lunch earlier, hanging out with the kids. Gonna go out and feed the horses later on today." "Oh, that's cool. What kind of horses do you have?" "Oh, well, we've got, who know, like the mundane things that you couldn't script could potentially be done in that way, but it's got to be very, very clear safeguards, and something that can only be contextual to the game and to that moment. Obviously, it wouldn't make sense for that character to not be in the context of the game. It can't just be wide open to talk about anything. You can't be talking. You can't
Right,
be
they have
in.
to be in character.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
So like kind of that could be part of the guardrails. Maybe that's some creative license there too on your part. Be like, hey, I want my NPCs to be like, I don't
yeah.
know, like a drunkard. I want
Right. Yeah, yeah,
had a
exactly. Yeah,
mysterious past. I want,
yeah.
something
Totally. Yep.
kind of like that.
Yep. Yep. Yep.
Um,
Absolutely. Yeah.
but
Yeah.
yeah, it's that's really cool. It's a cool creative
Yeah.
idea, and I can see that
Yeah.
being really really fun and making kind of gameplay hit a mixed reality place that I hadn't thought of
Yeah.
before. So that's pretty cool.
I mean,
Like it's
it's
like reactive to you, react
exactly.
when
Yeah.
were you here last? Yeah, and that's
Exactly.
pretty.
Yeah. Well, and that's kind of where you lose a lot of the when you talk about generative AI, then you talk about any of this of acting or any art. So much art is active and reactive. It
Mm,
is and not only reactive to the moment that you're in, but reactive to the experiences that you've had and to the your life, of growing up and the experience that you had growing up and the context in which these things happen. Because, you and I have a conversation about something and, we reference something in like fourth grade. You and I are going to have completely different reactions to what fourth grade was like for us. And that's going to color our reaction to this conversation that we have. That's something an AI is never going to have. It can't speak from experience. It can't speak from personal trauma. It can't speak from memories of something that only you have experienced. Like, there's memories and experiences that each of us have that are unique to every single one of us that nobody that one we've probably forgotten and could never share with anybody, but two influence the things that we do now in our life
mm,
based on things that memories that we've had and that are so ingrained in us in our experiences. AI will never have that. It can never know why to do something. It will know what to do and how to do it, but it'll never know why. Because the why is something that I think only we as humans can provide.
It makes me think of a few visualizations going back to the voice print and it kind of a
Mm,
fingerprint and like tree rings and like how
yeah,
things kind of organically grow through their experiences and how even a voice,
yeah,
right? You can hear like in a
absolutely.
quiver
Yeah,
or it just like when someone's quiet or they hold
yeah,
back and what the tension in their body, it's an expression of all that, their
yeah.
experiences too.
Well, absolutely. And you can also tell when somebody is pretending like they are sad, but they're trying not to sound sad, or somebody who is angry and they're trying to be really angry at you, but you're like, I know you're not really angry. You're trying to sound angry, right? Or somebody, this is what it sounds like to be angry. This is what it sounds like to be sad, right? It's the sounds are influenced by the experience and the emotion, and you can't just make the sound minus that experience and emotion because the sound will then just be a sound with no context. It doesn't mean anything. So it
Hmm.
may sound sad, but you're not going to feel sad. You're not going to feel the emotion that somebody has because sad does not always sound sad.
Hmm.
Sad will feel sad. If you ever like talk to somebody who is, like they're trying so hard to sound happy and be happy, and but you can feel the underlying sadness in their laughter, right? This underlying sadness in their upbeat persona, or something along those lines, right? Where you feel that emotion, even though they don't sound necessarily the same way.
Yeah, totally. Like what is art without the feeling, right? It's kind
Right.
of the
Exactly.
whole
Exactly. Yeah.
thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's wonderful. To kind of just like very poetic. It's just
Yeah,
ringing in my
thanks.
mind. Um, I think we answered most of my questions. I did
Okay.
want to see. Oh yeah, this is one I did want to ask.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Do you have any advice for someone who's getting started in this field now? And they do have AI to contend with out there, and they
Mhm.
might, like be curious about voice acting, but still want to
Yeah.
get into it, but it feeling challenged by the space given everything that's out there today.
It's been a challenging space for a long time. The over because of the rise of this online casting, the saturation of
Mm,
the industry is massive. There's lots of there's this idea that it's an easy thing to get into. Just give us $400, $600, and you can make six figures in a year. Take this online class, sign up for this casting site. It doesn't work that way. If you really want to be a professional voice actor who has a career in this, it's a
mm,
long haul. I mean, I started in '96. I didn't go full time until 2016. I'm not a tip. That's not a typical journey for most people who really want to get into voice acting. But it's not a quick journey either. It's not a 6 week take a class, make a demo, and start making a bunch of money. It doesn't work that way. Um, because it is voice acting. It is acting. It is voice acting, and acting is the most important part of this that I think a lot of people miss. They say I can do funny voices or I can do a great voice. A voice doesn't mean anything if it doesn't have the emotion. So same thing with, AI means nothing if it just sounds like an AI voice that doesn't have any emotion. The same thing if you're a voice actor, if you can just do funny voices but not have any emotion behind that character. If you can, great, you can do Mickey Mouse, but can you do Mickey Mouse in every possible scenario? Can you do Mickey Mouse in a parent teacher conference? Can you do Mickey
mhm.
Mouse's voice ordering fast food from McDonald's? Can you do Mickey Mouse going to Taco Bell and getting the wrong order? Can you go to Mickey Mouse buying a pair of shoes? Can you go to Mickey Mouse having an argument with Minnie Mouse somewhere over the price of coffee because Minnie Mouse doesn't want to go to Starbucks and you do, right? So it's a lot of people are like, oh, I can sound like Mickey Mouse or I can sound like whoever, Porky Pig. I can sound like Donald Duck. But can you be Donald Duck in that lived environment that experience that they're living in? Can you bring all of that experience of what it means to be Donald Duck to that character and do that? That's if you can do that now you've got someplace to start from. But it's a start. And now you
Mm,
have to know that you're competing against hundreds of thousands of other people who are trying to do the same thing and that there is a lot of work out there, but the work is going to go to the people who are prepared and can do it the best and are professional and can be a solution to somebody's problem and not the problem
mm.
to their problem. So it takes a lot of work. It's also there are a lot of predators in the industry that try and make it sound easy. And try and make it sound like something that you can just do overnight. You can just do on a take a weekend class and get a demo. It is not how it works. It is like anything else that you do. If you want to be a professional at it, you've got to put in the 10,000 hours.
Mm,
Along those, the antithesis of that is that there's also so many more opportunities out there that if it's something that you want to do, the chances of you finding opportunities for work are higher than they've ever been. There's more work out there than there has been in years. There's so much work out there. But it's a matter of finding it and being able to have access to that and being prepared when the time comes, when the opportunity arises, that you are the best at what you do and you are the best person for that job at that time.
yeah, you're saying like acting, it's not just having a cool voice or having a voice that
No,
can have range, but also being able to get into acting in a character and to bring into that
absolutely.
that scene
And
to life.
yeah,
Yeah, you
and
pick
and
so many scenes. I'm like, I want to hear
yeah,
I
yeah,
want to
exactly.
hear
Well, and then
us
and
arguing
that's
over some
just an
coffee.
animation, right? Go into commercials, go into
Mm,
healthcare commercials, go into fast food commercials. All of those are characters. They are acting in some capacity, right? Well, now, if you're trying to sell McDonald's and trying to have a conversation as Mickey Mouse, though, that's acting. They're characters. They are things you have to bring to that imaginary environment that you're going to be living in that have to be in place that are going to make the difference between somebody who just has a great voice and somebody who can be a great performer and a great actor.
mm, yeah, definitely.
Mm.
Goes back to kind of like the feeling behind everything and making it come to
Yeah,
life. And it's kind of reminded me too just how important acting is, like as a craft.
yeah,
Like when you go and
absolutely.
disappear into a
Yep,
theater or more gameplay has more narrative than ever before, I
absolutely.
would
Yeah,
say.
yeah. Yep.
get kind of transported and it helps you process. It helps you understand
Yeah.
yourself a bit better by the other
Yeah.
side. But it's
Yeah. And
yeah.
video games are great. Video games are bigger than Hollywood.
Mm,
They're multi-billion-dollar industry. And you're absolutely, the games have become more cinematic, right? They have become more narrative. They have become more movie-like. They have become more real and grounded and emotional and, transportive and transformative and immersive in ways that you used to only get, with movies or other somewhat immersive materials. But imagine, a movie's 2.5, 3 hours long. A video game is 40, 60, 80, 100 hours that you're
mm,
going to immerse in that world. And, if you're in that world, you don't want to come across one AI generated character's, 25 hours into the game that destroys it for you. You don't want to have that, that break in that immersive experience that you're having. You know?
hmm Yeah, that's like the power that we're able to deliver today through our technology and through our,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
also through our storytelling, right? Like that's the core of a
Yeah,
lot of this is that we want to
absolutely.
continue to
Yeah.
be storytellers with each other
Yeah.
and
Yep.
bring each
Yep.
other
Yep.
into experiences that I don't know, potentially could, not just transport us, but yeah, like you said, transform us too.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah.
Very exciting. In
Yeah.
theory, in theory,
Yeah,
if we get the
exactly. In
guardrails
theory.
in
Yeah.
place, like I'm all
Yep.
for
Yep.
it. I'm all for the good
Absolutely.
stuff. I'm all
Yep.
for the technology in a lot of fun ways. Just let's get the
Yep.
guardrails straight.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Um,
Yep. Yep.
yeah, I did
Yeah.
want to end it with one other last
Yeah.
question, which is
Yeah.
I just was thinking a lot about voice when I was thinking
Mhm.
about just preparing for this, and it's just like
Yeah.
why is voice so powerful? Like why? Because when you think about someone and standing up for something they believe in,
Mhm.
what I'm saying, like
Yeah.
make your voice heard. Like what is it about us having a human being having voice, and even the way we communicate, having language, like this is
Yeah.
just yeah, I'm just curious what your kind of putting you on the spot, but yeah, like what
Yeah.
are
I mean,
your
that's
thoughts
that's
on like
that's a
what
great
makes voice
question.
powerful?
I mean, voice. I mean, that is a great question, and I honestly I don't know that I have an answer for it. I mean, it is the. I mean, it is so much of an expressive part of our soul and our experience in life. I mean, you can hear experience in somebody's voice. You can hear um so much. I mean, voice is the ultimate lie detector, I guess, right? I mean, you can't, you can try, but your voice will give you away for good or for bad. Um, and your voice will always tell. You can always tell the truth in the sound of somebody's voice. I think in a way that you can't in other capacities, other expressive ways that we express ourselves. But I mean, it is something that's so unique to everybody, right? It is such a unique identifier for every single person. Um, but I think, I mean, it's the I guess it is just a very clear lie detector that you can just tell. You can tell through somebody's voice how they're feeling, what their experience is.
Mm.
It's very hard to lie with your voice. Along the flip side is that it's also, if you're a good actor, it's very easy to lie and to create that lived experience and the truth to recreate truth through your voice. Um, that I don't think you can do in any other way.
Yeah,
Uh,
you're putting
uh,
me into a new thought now because
yeah,
they always say like eyes are the window to the soul, but I'm sort of like,
yeah,
actually,
yeah.
voice might be up there too. I,
Voice is there. Yeah, I mean, it's if you really listen to somebody, and it's really interesting. Like you can, um, if you look at like a great example of this is like the Nixon Kennedy debates. That those people who heard the debate had a completely different opinion from those who saw the debate,
mm,
and those who saw it thought that I believe that Kennedy won, and those who heard it thought that Nixon won in that thing in that because Kennedy looked like in this case, I guess the visual overpowered the voice, but those who actually heard the truth in the voices and felt that Nixon was the winner in that case. But it's really interesting. It's probably the last, like one of the last moments where we have in history of that crossover when those people were when radio was still powerful enough of a medium that people were going to listen to it that way. You
yeah,
know?
tune in like that. Yeah, I
Yeah,
can imagine
yeah,
like how much more revealing it might have been to hear candidates speak. Just and I'm like, I'm gonna
right.
turn off
Yeah,
the
exactly.
visual and start listening,
Yep.
see if
Just
I can
listen. Just
yeah,
listen. But
peep the nerves.
on the
Yeah.
flip side, is like, you give yourself away with your voice or your body movements. I mean, it's a whole package, right? I mean, your whole
Mm.
persona and who you are and how you act and talk and move and body language, all of these things together, you know, make up the truth of who you are. And any one of those, I guess, could give you away. So yeah.
Ah, sorry, my cat's trying to join me, of course.
Oh, nice, nice,
Yeah, he's all black, so he's not gonna pop in,
nice.
but
Oh, yep, he's not. Yep, there he is. That's
very
awesome.
good. Yeah, he must no, he must know I'm really engaged because that's what
Yeah.
usually when I'm really
Yep.
interested in something, he pops up.
Nice, nice.
Um, yeah, but I guess that's like all my questions for today. Was
Okay.
there anything you
Cool.
wanted to mention or end on? Otherwise, we
No, no, I think you're on the right track. I think we have to look at this as kind of a multifaceted approach to this. We're looking at it from we're educating the talent, we're educating the producers, and we're trying to get legislation in place. And that's a three prong approach that we're taking. Um, I mean, there was definitely a big sense of urgency last year, and we knew that last year was an urgent year that we really had to put things in place and make an effort. And I think this year is going to play out based on what we did last year. So hopefully we see some good changes. But we have to make something has to happen relatively short within a few weeks from now, 2 months maybe. That we need some protections in place before this election really gets deep into moving.
Yeah, I would agree. Like the sooner the better. But
Yeah,
that being
exactly.
said,
Yeah,
it still needs to be based in hopefully the reality of people that are working in the space, right?
yeah,
Sometimes things happen
yeah,
like too fast because they rush. So hopefully there's
yeah,
still
yeah,
like an
yep,
effort to crowdsource with people like yourself in
yeah,
industry and folks
yeah.
like even everyday citizens, just people that are just like, hey, I want my rights protected too. This
Yeah,
is like a new
absolutely.
space.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, so thank you
Absolutely.
again so much. This was such a
Yeah.
pleasure to get
Awesome.
to interview, take this time of yours and get to learn more about your journey into voice acting
Yeah.
and also your thoughts around the use of technology in the space and potential ways it could go well, potential
Yeah.
ways it could go not well.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
all that.
Yeah.
So yeah, thank you
Awesome.
again.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate the question. This is great. Had fun.
Yeah,
Yep.
me too. Thank you.
Awesome. All right.
All right.
Cool.